I'm really shaken as I write this, and I had to take a moment to collect myself. My experience might not seem as intense as some others, but it still scares me to my core. On a sweltering July night in '96, my parents, my 2 sisters, and I decided to have a family picnic in Yellowstone National Park. It was our monthly tradition, a way to spend quality time together. We had another sibling, an older brother, but he had already moved out by then. After we finished our meal and enjoyed the beautiful scenery, my dad decided to take us on a drive around the park. We ended up on the Grand Loop Road, a popular route in Yellowstone. As we were driving, I noticed that there were no other cars on the road. It was suddenly very quiet, almost strange. As we continued driving, I was looking out the back window when I heard my dad exclaim, "What on earth?" I quickly turned to look out the front windshield, and I was terrified. Our car's headlights had illuminated a bizarre sight. A massive creature, standing on 2 legs, was crossing the road. It was covered in thick, dark fur and stood at least 8 feet tall. It had a hunched back and long arms that swung as it walked. It didn't look like any animal I'd ever seen before. It was neither a bear nor a human, but something in between. I was frozen in fear as it crossed the road and disappeared into the dense forest. My dad quickly turned the car around and we sped back towards the picnic area. We were all silent, too shocked to speak. When we finally got back, my mom asked us what had happened. We tried to explain, but she just laughed it off, thinking we were trying to scare her. But I knew what I saw, and it wasn't a joke. Over the years, I've heard stories of strange sightings around Yellowstone. I always thought they were just tall tales, but after that night, I can't help but believe there's some truth to them. I haven't been back to Yellowstone since that night, and I don't plan on going back anytime soon. I don't know what that creature was, but I do know that it was real. It was the most bizarre and terrifying experience of my life. I've only shared this story with a few close friends and my wife, fearing that others might ridicule me, but I felt the need to share it here, hoping that someone might have had a similar experience. That's my story, and I swear it's true. Hey everyone, I wanted to share a bizarre experience I had recently. I'm 22, and I was on a solo hiking trip in Yellowstone National Park. I was walking along the Norris Geyser Basin, a 2-lane gravel road just east of Obsidian Cliff. It was a quiet afternoon. The area was pretty isolated, no houses or anything around. As I was walking, I saw something strange. It was a large creature, slowly walking across the road. It was a weird sight. I mean, it's not every day you see something like this in the middle of the park. The creature was a deep, earthy brown color, like the color of a worn-out leather jacket. It had long, tangled hair that looked like it hadn't been groomed in a while. It was a hefty creature, definitely over 6 feet tall, with a large, round head and what looked like whiskers. It was a brief encounter. I probably only saw it for about 10 seconds before it disappeared into the thick forest. I was too shocked to even think about taking a picture. I stood there for a moment, trying to process what I had just seen. I was sure it wasn't a bear or any other animal I was familiar with. It was something different, something I had never seen before. I continued my hike, trying to shake off the strange encounter. I made camp near the Firehole River, just off the Fairy Falls Trail. It was a peaceful spot. The sound of the river was soothing. I set up my tent and started to prepare my dinner. As I was cooking, I heard a noise. It was a series of high-pitched whoops, like someone or something was calling out. The sound was clear and distinct. It seemed to be coming from the north, probably about half a mile away. I stopped what I was doing and listened. The whoops continued, echoing through the quiet forest. Then, I heard the same whoops coming from the south. It was like the sounds were answering each other, a bizarre call and response. I was puzzled. I had no idea what could make such a sound. I decided to finish my dinner and turn in for the night, hoping that the strange sounds would stop. The next morning, I packed up my camp and continued my hike. I couldn't shake off the strange encounter from the previous day. I decided to stop by the ranger station near the Old Faithful geyser. I told the ranger about the creature I had seen and the strange sounds I had heard. He listened attentively, but didn't seem surprised. He told me that there had been similar sightings and sounds reported in the area recently. He advised me to be cautious and to report any further encounters. I left the ranger station feeling a bit uneasy. I continued my hike, but I couldn't shake off the feeling of unease. I kept my eyes and ears open, ready for any signs of the strange creature. I didn't see or hear anything unusual for the rest of my trip. I'm back home now, but I can stop thinking about that strange encounter. I've been doing some research, trying to figure out what I saw and heard. I haven't found any solid answers yet. I'm not sure if I'll ever know what it was, but I know what I saw and heard was real. It was a bizarre experience, one that I'll never forget. I'm not scared, but I am more aware of my surroundings when I'm out in the wilderness now. I guess the moral of the story is, always be prepared for the unexpected when you're out in nature. You never know what you might encounter. This is a story that I remember as clearly as if it happened yesterday. I'll only use initials to protect the identities of those involved. There were quite a few of us involved at the time. You can take this story however you want. In the summer of 1995, while I was in college, we were all at the Old Faithful Inn in Yellowstone National Park, preparing for a summer camp event. Suddenly, a group of guys from our college football team came running up to the inn, shouting and hollering about something they had seen in the woods near the Firehole River. They claimed that whatever it was bigger than JS, and had grabbed him while he was in the woods taking a leak. JS was a football player, standing at over 6 foot 4 inches tall and weighing around 250 pounds. JS wouldn't get out of the car when they arrived at the inn. He was pale as a ghost and seemed to be in some sort of shock. Another football player, Minnesota, described the creature as being tall, even when it was hunched over. It had long, straight brown hair, like a bear or something. He said there were twigs and leaves tangled in its hair, and it looked really dirty. The smell was the worst part, according to MN. He said it was so bad that it made him gag. The guys were driving a Jeep with the top down, and MN said the smell was so strong it almost made him throw up. They sped back to the inn as fast as they could, leaving JS's truck behind. They were so scared they didn't even put the top back up on the Jeep. The spot where they saw the creature was only about a half-mile from the inn. Needless to say, none of us were too keen on going out after dark for the rest of our stay. This might sound strange, but about a week before this incident, we kept hearing a bizarre scream. It wasn't any animal we recognized, and after a couple of days, we just chalked it up to some prankster trying to scare us. But after the incident with JS, we weren't so sure anymore. The next day, a group of us decided to go back to the spot where JS had his encounter. We found his truck still parked where he left it, but there was no sign of the creature. We did find some strange footprints, though, much larger than any of ours, and they didn't look like any animal tracks we recognized. We reported the incident to the park rangers, but they didn't seem too concerned. They said it was probably just a bear or a moose, but we knew what we saw, and it was no bear or moose. We never saw the creature again, and JS never really talked about it after that day. He quit the football team and transferred to another college the following semester. We all went our separate ways after college, but every now and then, we still talk about that summer in Yellowstone. I recently had a chat with JB, a retired park ranger who used to work in Yellowstone National Park. JB and his cousin, also a ranger, would often patrol together during harsh weather conditions. Their regular route was around the park's northern loop, from Mammoth Hot Springs to Tower Roosevelt, then east towards the Lamar Valley. In the winter of 2015, JB and his cousin were driving east on the northern loop, just before reaching the Tower Roosevelt area. This is approximately 5 miles west of the Lamar Valley. JB was in the passenger seat while his cousin was at the wheel. A heavy snowstorm had hit the park in the past 24 hours. It was around 3 a.m. As they neared the Tower Roosevelt area, they both spotted a large, dark figure standing near the right side of the road. The snow-covered landscape made the figure stand out clearly. It was a massive, two-legged creature. JB described it as incredibly tall, with arms that reached down to its knees. Its head was turned towards them, almost as if it had been waiting for them. They slowed down the vehicle, and the creature disappeared into the darkness. A few seconds later, a bright light flashed from where the creature had been. They didn't speak about it much after that night. Fast forward to the summer of 2016, JB and a group of park rangers were assigned to patrol the Lamar Valley. They were told to keep an eye out for any signs of wildfires due to the dry conditions. As they were making their way through the valley, they heard a strange noise coming from behind a cluster of trees. They decided to investigate. Behind the trees was a large open field. In the middle of the field was a dead bison, and feeding on it was a creature that JB described as resembling a large wolf, but standing on 2 legs. It turned its head towards them, its eyes glowing red in the fading sunlight. It bared its teeth at them before they all turned and ran back to their vehicle. JB said he had never seen anything like it before or since. Now, here's where things get really bizarre. A few months ago, I was talking to a friend who works as a biologist in Yellowstone. I told him about JB's encounters, and he told me something that made my jaw drop. Apparently, a few years back, they had discovered a pack of wolves in the park that had a rare genetic mutation. This mutation caused them to grow much larger than normal wolves, and some even had the ability to walk on their hind legs for short periods of time. This revelation was a shock to me. Could it be that what JB and his cousin had seen all those years ago was not some mythical creature, but a pack of mutated wolves? It's certainly a possibility. And while it may not be as exciting as a real-life werewolf, it's still a fascinating piece of local lore. And who knows, maybe these strange wolves are still out there, roaming the vast wilderness of Yellowstone National Park. In summer 2014, I was recovering from a severe bout of pneumonia and was unable to return to my retail job. I was going stir-crazy at my home in Jackson Hole, so my childhood friend Tim, who lived in Idaho, offered to come and pick me up and drive me over to his place for a few weeks. We would drive in his aged Ford truck from Jackson Hole through Yellowstone National Park, a journey that presented spectacular views that were always welcome. One summer night, Tim was driving me back to Jackson. It was late, somewhere past 10 p.m., as we drove along US Highway 20, a route that weaves through Yellowstone. We were trudging at a slow pace because it was a rainy night and visibility wasn't great. There was a semi-truck a sizable distance ahead of us on that relatively quiet road. Then, out of nowhere, something human-sized but not human-like charged into view from the left. It dashed across the highway with inhuman speed and collided with the rear end of the semi, causing it to sway dangerously before the driver regained control. The semi then continued down the road, shaken but unhurt. I remember watching in shock as this thing, clearly taller than a man, quickly recovered from its collision and turned to face us. It had broad shoulders, body covered in fur, and eerily human eyes. We came to a screeching halt, our hearts pounding in our chests. For a moment it just stood there, the rain washing over its massive form, and it stared at us. Then, in an instant, it let out a roar that was so deep, so haunting, that it echoed through the night. With two powerful leaps covering an impossible distance, it disappeared into the tree line. After what felt like an eternity of silence, we finally managed to piece together words again. Was it a bear? A bison? An elk? None of those answers seemed right. The shoulders were too broad, the way it moved too agile, its body too streamlined, not to mention that strange amber glow in its eyes. We reported the incident to the park rangers the next day. They listened to our report, mostly with skeptical expressions. They didn't say much about what they thought it was. Who knows these days? I recently got an interesting message from an acquaintance of mine, recounting a strange occurrence that one of his colleagues had to go through just a week ago. Both of these guys worked the graveyard shift for Planet Blue, a park maintenance company, which mostly operates near the Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming. A lot of their work involves maintenance along the park's trails, which are surrounded by vast wilderness and natural beauty. As part of their daily routine, one of them has to drive down to a secluded firewatch tower around 4 a.m. to check if everything is in order. This tower, located around 6 miles from the park's visitor center, is primarily used for spotting fires in the forest during the dry season. The tower is surrounded by a locked chain-link fence for safety and security. The guy on duty, who happens to be the buddy of my friend, had recently started expressing that he often felt an unnerving sensation, an eerie feeling of being constantly watched while he was there. One morning, as this gentleman was driving in the company pickup truck to the watchtower, he saw something bizarre as he slowed down near a cabin during his ride. The rustic cabin, owned by one of the senior park rangers, was somewhat concealed by the forest, with only the front porch's lantern providing some warmth against the chilly pre-dawn darkness. In the lantern-lit driveway of the cabin, he noticed a creature standing on its hind dog-like legs, maintaining a posture akin to a hunched-over human. It seemed to tower over everything else, standing close to 7 feet tall. Its body was covered in dark hair, except for the torso, which seemed to be almost bare. Its head had wolf-like features, and the expression on its face was nothing short of sinister. Caught off guard, the park worker described his first impression of the creature as something that was potentially bad news. The two spent a tense few moments locked in an uneasy stare-down before he decided to drive onwards, shaking but determined to continue his duties. His next stop, the Firewatch Tower, lay just a few bends away, no more than a mile from the cabin. He was determined to fulfill his responsibilities, despite the lingering sense of fear tightening its cold grip on him. His courage was admirable, especially considering the tower's isolated location. What's more, the area surrounding the tower is not well lit, and the truck's headlights were the only source of illumination. Stationary, with the light negatively impacting his field of vision, he was acutely aware that the creature could potentially be lurking nearby, unbeknownst to him. Despite the fear, he conducted his round successfully, making sure his checks were thorough, before eventually locking up the tower's gate and leaving. What do you guys think? I was 13, staying up late into the night, lost in a video game. It was summer vacation, and I was making the most out of no school. I was staying at my uncle's cabin, a stone's throw away from the main tourist area of Yellowstone National Park, Wyoming. The balcony overlooked the dense vegetation. The blinds were pulled back to let the cool night air in. Suddenly, I heard rustling outside. A coyote, maybe? A small scavenger messing around in the garbage? Glancing outside, I saw bright yellow eyes shimmering in the dark. of course accompanied by a strange face with a snout. Scared, I scrambled back, and then I heard a weird howl outside. I could even hear footsteps receding into the woods. By the time I gathered the courage to look outside again, whatever it was gone. A couple of years later, my buddies and I decided to relive that wild experience. 5 of us, a deer in mind, we decided to go hunting on Hayden Valley, smack in the middle of Yellowstone. Our decision to arm ourselves had a backstory. It was an incident a year prior that sent chills down our spine. My cousin and her friends, about 6 years our junior, were returning home late one night when they saw a figure lying motionless on the road. Blocking their path, they had to put the car in reverse. But as they did so, the figure sprang up and chased them, bringing with him a slew of out-of-nowhere folks from the nearby forests who tried opening their car doors and slowing them down. They sped off in panic and came home to share their tale, hence the need for arms and protection. That night, the moon was bright and full. A thick fog spread low around our legs. Visibility was pretty good. We scanned the valley from our vantage point, spotting a huge dark form around 150 yards into the valley at the tree line. We stopped dead in our tracks, staying dead silent, trying to figure out what it was. We thought it was nothing but a large rock or maybe a bush. Boy, were we wrong. We ventured a bit further ahead, and when we looked back at the spot, the form was gone. We panicked. Soon, we spotted something dashing from right to left, about 4 feet above the fog. Too massive for a coyote, way quicker than a deer. Its movement was bizarre. Long, agile limbs outstretched with each leap, a noticeably larger hump on its back. Then, it steered directly toward us. We had never seen anything like it. We were flabbergasted. As it headed our way, we readied our rifles. 3 of us had them. Upon seeing our weapons, it zigzagged its movement. It was fast, almost twitchingly fast. It was clear that we weren't dealing with an average park resident, but something much stranger. We then decided to get the hell out of there. As we fled towards the cars, one of my pals tripped, and I had to circle back to help him out. Given the speed at which the creature was covering ground, I'm convinced that had it wanted to catch us, it would have easily done so. It seemed like it was just chasing us off. Even as we scrambled into the car, I could see it bounding behind us, only giving up chase once we were across Clear Lake, towards the Artist's Point Road. It wasn't like it ever came out of the park premises, or crossed the bridge. It almost seemed to mock us, like it enjoyed the chase. The entire incident happened so fast, I'm not even sure of the specific details. Distinct features? Couldn't make them out as it was too far away. However, I'm certain it was a creature larger than any coyote, deer, or bear, and moved with a speed and agility contrary to its size. The whole experience was so strange and out of the ordinary that it frightened us and intrigued us at the same time. I managed to catch a better glimpse as we bolted away in the car. It dashing after us, its body looked bulky, more like a wild boar or hyena. Its forelimbs were longer than its hind ones. Tail and ears? Didn't get a good look. Also, it doesn't help that the encounter happened so quickly. Fast forward to 2019, my girlfriend and I were driving along the North Entrance Road, a bit past Gardner just before sundown. The weather was nice, providing ample light as thin clouds hung high in the sky. Mid-conversation, she looked out my window, her eyes widened, and she blurted, "What the heck is that?" She pointed across the expansive field running alongside the road. As I looked, I saw a massive black figure, its upper body bulging and disproportionately larger, sprinting full tilt along the forest edge. The creature eventually disappeared behind a roadside cabin. Once we reached home, she confirmed my suspicion. It was fast, bigger than a bear, shape similar to a wolf. She exclaimed, It was one of those things, wasn't it? In 2003, me and my daughter had another encounter. We heard this woman-like high-pitched shriek at our cabin near Gardner. Within no time, we heard heavy metal scraping outside. This creature was trying to budge a huge air conditioner outside our cabin. It seemed to step onto it, swaying back and forth. Then with a thrust, it was gone. The creature looked like a white, overweight beast with short legs, 7 feet tall at least, and easily weighing around 400 pounds. It reminded me of an albino Sasquatch, like if a polar bear, gorilla, wolf, and man were rolled into one. I reported the incident to the park rangers. Turns out, others had witnessed similar sightings. Ever since, it has been a long, ongoing tale in the park. It's not every day you encounter the strange and bizarre in Yellowstone, but when you do, the tranquil paradise transforms into a hair-raising horror. Hey folks, I'm reaching out because my research buddy and I are dealing with a strange situation here in Yellowstone National Park. We've been studying the local wildlife, specifically the elusive Bigfoot, for a couple of years now, but recently, we've run into a bizarre issue with what we believe is a Dogman. Since February 1st, this creature has been marking its territory on our research cabin, about 4 feet up, in different spots. It's also damaged a few trees, taking a bite out of one and slashing another. It seems to be most active in the early morning hours, growling around our cabin. We've managed to capture it on video, audio, and trail cam, so we're pretty sure about what we're dealing with. We're just looking for some advice on how to handle this situation. Our cabin is located in a part of the park that's mostly closed during the winter, with only a few year-round residents. But now that spring is here, we're starting to see more visitors. We're worried about their safety, especially since we've heard some pretty loud howls coming from the woods near our cabin. We've tried to scare it off by firing a few warning shots, but it doesn't seem to be deterred. My research partner, Jake, has a brother, Sam, who lives in a nearby cabin. Sam has also reported seeing a Dogman near his property. He's even seen it walking towards his cabin and has noticed strange shadows near the family's old cabin. We're trying to get permission from the park authorities to investigate further, but it's been a slow process. Jake has also reported hearing strange noises when he's out tracking elk. He's heard footsteps, knocks, grunts, and growls that don't match any known wildlife in the park. A couple of years ago, something spooked the bison herd that our friend Sarah looks after. When one of the bison was found, it was in a bad state with deep claw marks and a broken leg. We're not sure if it was the Dogman, but it's a possibility. We've also found some strange tracks around our cabin. They're larger than a wolf's, but smaller than a bear's, and they have a unique shape that we can't identify. We've taken some plaster casts and sent them off to a specialist for analysis. We're not sure what to do next. We're worried about the safety of the park visitors and the local wildlife. We've contacted the park authorities, but they're not taking us seriously. They think we're just trying to stir up trouble or get attention. But we know what we've seen and heard. We're not making this up. If anyone has any advice or has had a similar experience, please let us know. We're desperate for any help we can get. Thanks for reading.